In this video, we're going to do a quick end-to-end demo of the Luminos.AI workflow manager platform. We are going to select and edit a form which encodes a specific workflow for evaluating an AI project. We're going to turn that form into a submission to evaluate a specific project, and we're going to assign some collaborators and make comments to interact with those collaborators. Then we're going to see from the viewpoint of one of our submitter collaborators what it looks like to enter information into a form, into a submission. We're going to see running a bias test, and then we'll see returning it back to the reviewer for approval. So let's go ahead and get started. We are here on our forms library page, and you can see out of the box here we have a number of forms that are already published for us to use, including the Utah and Colorado AI Acts, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology AI Risk Management Framework, and a couple of other useful, simple evaluation forms. You'll get these out of the box. You can build your own, or you can modify the ones that you get. And so we're going to do an example of that today. Starting with the NIST AI Risk Management Framework form here. I'm going to double click on it to go into it here. Now, in this context, at the moment, I am logged in as a Brian reviewer, meaning I'm a person who owns this form, and I will be the reviewer or evaluator of the submission when it happens. So the form you can think of as a template to encode the workflow. Building it is very similar to building something in Google Forms. We have elements, section titles, textual elements, simple text entry response fields, more complex response fields like radio buttons. We have unique legal ones like electronic signature attestation blocks. But we also have unique items to the Luminos platform, including this quantitative bias test module, which looks just like any other element when you're building a form. You can just drag and drop it in here and do some basic configuration. But what this element does behind the scenes is it will actually accept a flat file of data, and it will perform statistical population testing for demographic biases on our own servers using our proprietary library, and return a report of the performance of the data set, which would represent, in this case, the output of an AI decision model. So we'll look at that in a little bit. But other kinds of elements you can see here, we've got some multi-selects. We've got the option to have special notes and instructions that are visible to the submitters and reviewers while they're filling this form out, but then those notes and instructions would not necessarily print in the final exported legal document. And we've got a review section here at the end. And on top of all of these things, we also have some workflow elements. If I go up here and I click on my rules builder, we won't spend a lot of time on this in this demo, but I can very simply build rules to expose different sections of this report depending on the contents of earlier sections of the report. So, for example, in this case, the review section, which will be evaluated only by the reviewer class users, doesn't get exposed for them to act on until the submitter users that are filling out information click ready for review here in section 4. Now I'm still here in form builder mode, so we're not working on any of that quite yet. But as the form owner, I'd like to modify this form a little bit before I send it out for evaluating a project. And in particular, I've got this review, I've got an approval and a signature block, but I don't have any comments here, and so I'm going to select my disposition signature block. I'm just going to add a new element. So you can see the kinds of elements that I have available to add down below here: sections, text blocks, text multi and single select, file attachments, the attestations, and our bias testers. So I'm going to add a simple text response here, and I'm going to just say disposition comments. And I'm going to make sure that this field is only editable by my reviewer class users. And that's it. All right, I've now modified this form, ready to go. I can save it under a new name, or I can deploy this, since I'm the form owner, as the new standard. So now that I have a form that I'm happy with, I'm going to go ahead and turn it into a submission. So the first thing that happens when I do that is it's going to ask me, recognizing that I'm the form owner and thus I'll be reviewing it, I can immediately assign submitters, the people that need to fill it out. Typically, a submitter would be like your data science team, your business owners of the product, junior lawyers, anybody else you want to have participate in documenting the intention and contents of this AI project. I'm just going to assign one submitter today, but you can assign as many as you like from different teams. You can see I get a pick list that comes up here, all the people that are on my team available, and as I start typing, I'll find Brian, data scientist, who I'm going to ask to actually work on this project. So now I'm going to create this submission, and instantly what you'll see is the screen will refresh, and now I have a submission of this workflow. And so I'm going to go up here and update my name for project ZZZ. So this will be using this workflow to evaluate a specific AI project that we're proposing to put into production. Now, one thing you'll notice here is that as I'm the reviewer still in this role, all these earlier sections of filling out information, I don't actually have access to these. And most of this form that we just edited is not visible because it's triggered on one of these dynamic questions down here. And so when the submitters answer that question, that will unlock a couple different versions of this form. But as a reviewer, I'm sort of waiting for them to act. What I can do at this point, though, is because I can see the progress of this document, but what I can do is I can actually assign individual elements of it to specific team members, and I can also use conversations, like you might use comments in a Google Doc, to interact with them offline. Rather than going to some other platform, sending an email, or starting a Slack, I can capture this conversation right here. So I'm going to say, Brian, data scientist, I'm going to target this comment to them and say, please complete this section. I'll type some more there. And I can make that just a comment, or I can actually assign this item as a thing that needs to be resolved by Brian, data scientist. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And so that is there. And now as a reviewer, I'm in a holding pattern, and I'm waiting for my team to fill out this form. They've all just been notified that this new submission has been created and that they have roles on it. They've additionally been notified if I've tagged them in comments that there's tasks that they have to work on. They'll get a very similar view where they can look at the comments and see what specifically is waiting for them. And so we're going to switch context real quick here and see what that looks like. So in this role, I'm logged in as the Brian Data Scientist user. And if I click on this page, you'll see that I have the submission of Project ZZZ is waiting for me. So I'm going to go ahead and open this one up. And so this looks just like the form we just saw, but in contrast to the view that my reviewer had, I actually have editable contents here. And so I can start filling this out, doing the documentation that, since this is my system that I'm trying to run through our workflow here, I can make comments in here, I can add entries, I can come down here and I can see the comments that were made. This one was from Brian Reviewer, assigned to me. I can reply to that and we can have a dialogue in real time. You'll see these things popping up on screens on both sides of the conversation. And as I start answering questions that may trigger workflows, we'll see, for example, if I say there's no sensitive data in this model and I've filled out the other pieces, then very quickly I get to this, this attestation that as a submitter, I can just go ahead and finish the workflow right here. I've documented what we're intending to do. There's no need to do detailed demographic bias testing, and so the workflow can be done. Submit it and we're out of here. However, if we do actually have a system that has more sensitive contents and we are required by the framework to perform some more testing and potentially remediation, if I click yes on this, I can see this unlocks our measure section here and our manage section down below, which includes the commentary on the results. And one of the elements that gets unlocked is our quantitative bias testing. So this bias tester, again, is running proprietary tests from our data science library in the background. I'm going to go ahead and pick some data. And I'm going to pick a data set that I know will fail just because it's more interesting to look at. And as soon as I upload that data to the system, the model goes through and it pulls out the header data from that file. So it's looking at my flat CSV file and it's recognizing that these are all the columns that it found. And it's asking me for some very basic setup information. Now I only have to do this once. If I use this submission again to evaluate this similar future versions of this data set multiple times, these selections will be retained. But I know that this particular model is a discrete outcome, so we can evaluate ranking or categorical outcomes, or we can evaluate binary predictions. And I just need to tell it where is the variable that stores the model's decision output and the variable that stores the ground truth. And in this case, this was a system that was making binary decisions whether to admit somebody to a facility based on facial recognition data or something. And so I know that these are the variables that I wanted to compare for our testing. I, of course, would like to select for demographic bias testing the protected characteristics of race and gender, which are encoded into the one-hot encoded into the data. And I also need a baseline control group against which to compare. So once I've selected those things once, now I've got my data uploaded and I'm ready to run my statistical bias testing. And again, what's happening in the background here is our model is looking at the output of the AI system in question, and it's performing population tests to decide whether any difference in treatment of those populations is statistically likely to be chance or looks unlikely to be chance, and it appears that there is some bias in the results of the model. And that's one of the things that you have to document to guarantee that you're being responsible with development of an AI system. So in this case, we have run a full suite of tests, and you can see we've got our 3 colors in the test results encoded. The dark green items are test results that are in our ideal range. The light green ones are acceptable, but could potentially be borderline, should be paid attention to. And the light red ones are ones that we want to scrutinize a little more closely. So in this case, for example, with the data set we uploaded, we can see we've run a number of different tests here, our kind of our full suite of tests. And from a gender bias standpoint, the male versus female performance of this model looks quite well balanced and within the acceptable ranges for all of our metrics. But the racial bias ones look like we've got some concerns in a couple of different areas. And so if you're a data scientist, you'll be familiar with what a binomial Z test or a Fisher's exact test for a small population sample size might be. If you're not a data scientist, you can rely on the built-in thresholds, the built-in color coding, and also the dynamically generated English language legally valid explanations of all the things that are shown here in the report. So we got an explanation of what the binomial Z test is, we've got an explanation of where it comes from, why it's considered a legally valid test to run, we have an explanation of what the thresholds are, and we have dynamically generated interpretations of, so the chance that that this test concludes that the difference, these classifications are different, the chance that this would happen by randomness is quite low. So it appears we have a statistically valid problem here with our model output. You can see the adverse impact ratio test, for example, you'll get similar comments. For every 1,000 white candidates who have a positive outcome, 825 Asian candidates have a positive outcome. This is a very easy thing to explain, even without going deeply into the statistics. So we run a number of different tests and explain how they are relevant, and we can have this as a basis for further conversation with our team. And then in our final section here at the end, once the test has been run, as we're reviewing it together, you can use your comments, you can use your collaborations, you can make commentary. In this particular form, it asks you to make commentary on the testing results itself and consider remediation methods that you might be interested in. And so, for example, if we found a slightly better training data set, we negotiated some resources so that we could improve the inputs to our model, then we can come back up here and we'll run this test again with a new data set and see how we've done. So I'm going to choose a different data file here. And this is a data set that we, of course, have curated to make sure that we passed, so we have some idea what that's going to look like. We'll go ahead and run that bias test. And so while that's running in the background, we're going to dynamically update the report that was generated. And we can also look at what's going to happen next. Once we've finished documenting the results and we've got a result that we're satisfied with as the submitters of this document, I can come down here and we'll mark ready for review. And the ready for review mark will unlock the final review stage by our evaluators. All right, so here we go. Here's our new results. We've got green across the board. So we're going to drop down to the bottom of the form here and we're going to mark ready for review. And then we can see as the submitters that this form is unlocked, this 5th section. Submitters have entered all required information and the final disposition will be judged by the reviewers. As the data scientist or the business team, my work here is now done. I can go up and make comments back to the reviewers, but they are already getting notifications that this mark was done, that this section is unlocked, and that it's now back in their hands. So we are going to switch tabs one more time and go back and look at what that looks like for our evaluators. All right, and here we go. Now I am back logged in as Brian Reviewer, and you can see that at the bottom of this form, we've unlocked our new disposition section, our comments, and our attestation. So if I decide to approve this document, I can make comments, I can sign in here and date it, and we have the approved mark unlocked. And so this document is stamped as complete if I'm satisfied with, of course, the results that happened up above. And we get the approved badge at the top for anybody that looks at it, and then we can go ahead and finalize this submission, which removes it from our active project file and moves it into our finalized file. And that is a complete end-to-end demo of the Workflow Manager forms and submissions and bias testing in the Luminos.AI platform.